It's been 10 years of Pixel phones, and now Google's most ambitious foldable yet, the Pixel 10 Pro Fold. So, last year when the Pixel 9 Pro Fold came out, a lot of people said, finally, it feels like a normal phone. But now, a year later with this new Pixel 10 Pro Fold, honestly, it feels basically the same on the outside. The hinge mechanism has been updated, the SIM tray has been moved from the bottom to the top, and the antenna panel at the top has been deleted. The rear cameras are slightly further apart, though the camera bump itself hasn't really changed. And that's pretty much it. But this is also the 10th generation of Pixel devices. It's a bit of a milestone year, and Google keeps reminding us that these phones were always conceived as AI-first devices. Inside, there are some bigger shifts. The new Tensor G5 chip, brighter displays, a larger battery, and now Pixel Snap wireless charging. It still comes in at $2,699 here in Australia, the same launch price as last year, but now with double the base storage. So, the big question today is, if it looks and feels almost identical, has Google actually done enough this year with the Pro Fold 10 to make it worth upgrading? Let's find out. Starting off with what's new, and under the hood there are some pretty important changes. The new Tensor G5 chip, Google's first fully designed and TSMC built processor, promises better efficiency and faster AI features. On paper, and according to Google, it's about 34% faster for CPU tasks, and the TPU that powers all the AI stuff is 60% stronger than last year. This is also the first chip to run Google's Gemini Nano model directly on device. The battery is also slightly larger this year at just over 5,000 milliamp hours. Then there's this new multi-alloy hinge design that feels a lot sturdier. Google calls it a gearless hinge, and they're rating it for 200,000 folds. It's also the first Pixel foldable to carry an IP68 dust and water resistance rating, which is a big step forward in durability. Pixel Snap wireless charging is here, bringing MagSafe style accessories to the Pixel ecosystem. And Google has also added a few new AI-driven tricks to the cameras, like night sight video and auto best take. However, the cameras themselves, they're basically unchanged from last year. Now, if we take a look at the Pixel 10 Pro Fold closed, it still feels like a thick phone. Compared to an iPhone 17 Pro Max, it's noticeably chunkier in the hand, but for a foldable, it's still impressive how close it gets to regular slab phone proportions. It definitely isn't class leading, it doesn't match the proportions of the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7. That thing is insanely thin, and companies in China are really pushing the boundaries with foldables. If you guys haven't heard of the Huawei Mate XT, make sure you Google that after this video. Now, Google says they've used an aerospace grade high strength aluminium alloy cover for this hinge movement, which is important because you won't be able to protect it with a case. In fact, we've got this case here which covers up my moonstone body, but the reality of living with a foldable means it's just a bit on the flimsy side. Speaking of the body, colors are a bit more interesting than the boring black and white of last year. We now get moonstone or jade. Meanwhile, the regular Pixel 10 gets more playful colors like indigo and lemongrass, with Google seeming to want the Fold to stay a bit more premium and understated. The phone itself, it weighs 258 grams, which is definitely on the heavy side, but manageable. And I can easily hold a corner of the screen while it's unfolded, and I don't feel like I'm straining to balance it. The SIM tray has moved from the bottom to the top, and for some reason, it's in place of the antenna panel that used to be on the Pixel 9 Pro Fold. And like I said, the camera bump, it pretty much looks exactly the same as last year, but the camera sensors themselves are slightly spaced out further. Like I said, it's really a game of spot the difference between the last two generations of Pixel Folds. The displays are where the Pixel 10 Pro Fold can assert some dominance in the foldable space. The outer screen is now a 6.4-inch Actua OLED, 408 pixels per inch at up to 120 Hz, with peak brightness now up to 3000 nits, up from 2700. It looks sharp and it's very usable outdoors, albeit I find the 20:9 aspect ratio a little cramped. Interestingly, the Pixel 9 Pro Fold had a slightly larger vertical resolution, despite having a slightly smaller screen, meaning that this phone actually has a lower pixel density on the outer display. Not to mention, the variable refresh rate on this screen is only from 60 Hz to 120 Hz, so battery usage is higher than it needs to be, particularly if you enable always on display. Open it up, however, and you do get this 8-inch Super Actua Flex display with LTPO refresh from 1 to 120 Hz. Resolution is sharp with 373 pixels per inch, and it's equally bright at 3000 nits, again up from 2700. It's the exact same screen as before, just with brighter HDR and peak brightness. But here's the thing. Watching YouTube in landscape doesn't actually feel that much bigger than an iPhone 17 Pro Max, for example, because of the square aspect ratio. Where it shines is multitasking. You can run 2 or 3 apps side by side, resize them, and it feels pretty natural. Reading PDFs, spreadsheets, emails, that's where this phone really feels at home. My advice would be, well, stick a TechSauce YouTube video on one side of the screen and read CarSauce.com news on the other side of the screen. It's what us enlightened intellectuals do to keep ourselves busy. I have to say, it was a little finicky to get used to setting up the split screen at first. There's a couple of steps involved, but you do somewhat get used to it. Also, this ultra thin glass panel does have a slight notch in the middle, but with the screen being so bright, when you are watching content, it just kind of fades into nothingness and your brain just blurs it out after a while. You can also set the fold halfway at 90 degrees, and suddenly it's like a mini laptop for watching videos or taking video calls. I will admit, I've done this once and then kind of never done it again. See, I can't help but feel like whichever way I choose to use this phone, I'm either using a thick, compromised, tall aspect ratio slab smartphone, or a square, compromised aspect ratio version of a tablet. The song "I Can't Get No Satisfaction" comes to mind. Durability is fantastic though, with Gorilla Glass Victus 2 on the outer display, and for the first time, this fold gets proper IP68 rating, so it's not only water resistant like last year, but officially dust resistant too. That's a big deal for foldable hinge design. Google also made a point about audio this year, claiming the Fold now has the best sound on a foldable in its class thanks to these upgraded speakers. So it's clear that they see the screen and the audio experience as an important package. So, battery and charging. Now, the Pixel 10 Pro has a 5015 milliamp hour battery, slightly bigger than last year's 4650 milliamp hours, with Google quoting up to 30 plus hours of regular use, or up to 84 hours with extreme power saver mode. This is a pretty decent increase at just under 8% more battery capacity, and it puts it quite far ahead of Samsung's 4400 milliamp hour battery in the Z Fold 7. Now, charging does top out at 30 watts on the Fold, which is an improvement over the lackluster 21 watts of last year, with about a 50% charge possible in about 30 minutes. You also now get Qi 2 support with 15 watt wireless charging through the Pixel Snap, and I have to say, the magnet strength is solid. I can even open it up and the magnet stays stuck in place. So if you're after an enormous desk clock, this is a very financially irresponsible way to make that happen. Now, like any other foldable, your battery life will depend a lot on which screen you use. If you stick to the outer screen most of the day, you'll have no problem. But if you live on the inner screen with gaming or video and multitasking, you'll definitely be chewing through that battery life like there's no tomorrow. So let's talk performance. Now, this year's Tensor G5 chip is the first fully in-house design built by TSMC on a 3 nanometer process. Google claims better efficiency, better AI processing, and longer sustained performance. On paper though, don't expect Snapdragon or Apple levels of raw power. This is tuned specifically for AI features and multitasking rather than top-end gaming. Now, I wasn't able to benchmark the Tensor G5 inside this Fold yet, but I did run full benchmarks with the Pixel 10 Pro XL, which has the same exact chip. Now here's what stands out. In single-core CPU performance, the Tensor G5 lags behind Apple's A19 Pro in the iPhone 17 Pro Max by about 40%. In multi-core CPU, it's the same story, about 40% slower than the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite inside the Galaxy S25 Ultra. And when it comes to the GPU, it honestly wasn't even close. The Tensor G5 is way behind both Apple and Qualcomm, and you feel that in gaming. I tried Destiny Rising, and while it's playable and the screen looks great, the frame rate is nowhere near what you'd get from an S25 Ultra or an iPhone 17 Pro Max. Where it does shine though is AI-heavy workloads. This G5 is built to accelerate Gemini Nano, Magic Q, and all of those live AI features that now run directly on the device. In actual use, everyday navigation tasks, they feel fluid, apps open quickly, multitasking between 2 or 3 windows doesn't bog the phone down at all, and AI-heavy features, like I said, Magic Q or on-device translations happen very quickly. But if you want to push graphically demanding games, you'll find the limits pretty quickly. Now let's get into something a little bit more controversial. the cameras. The Pixel 10 Pro Fold carries this triple camera setup on the back. A 48 megapixel main sensor, a 10.5 megapixel ultra wide with autofocus and macro focus, and a 10.8 megapixel telephoto with 5 times optical zoom. On paper, that looks solid enough, but for a phone with Pro in the name, it's worth noting that these are essentially the same sensors that you'll find in the base Pixel 10, not the upgraded hardware you get on the new slab Pixel 10 Pro. Google does give you Pro controls and the option to shoot in RAW, which will appeal to some, but if you're expecting the absolute best Pixel camera system, this just isn't it. Where the Pixel 10 Pro Fold shines, and to be fair, other Pixels too, is in low light photography. Night sight still delivers some of the most natural looking results on any smartphone. Bright images with well-balanced color and detail without going too far into over-sharpened or overexposed territory you sometimes get on some competitors. The ultra-wide does a pretty good job for landscapes and group shots, and autofocus means you can get surprisingly decent macro photos, but sharpness still drops off around the edges. The telephoto at 5 times is handy for portraits and tighter framing, and super res zoom extends that up to 20 times. The problem is that results can sometimes be hit and miss. Sometimes Google's AI upscaling produces something passable, and other times it just looks pure AI, like it's been smeared or painted on. Video performance is still a bit of a weak spot compared to Apple. Stabilization is decent with optical image stabilization carried on from last year, but handheld video still doesn't match the smoothness or reliability of an iPhone. The new AI video features like audio magic eraser and night sight video are neat in theory, but in practice, they're situational rather than everyday tools. One of my favorite things about having a foldable design though is how you can take selfies. Flip the phone open and fold it back around and use the outer display as a viewfinder for the main rear cameras. It means you can take much sharper selfies and group photos than the 10 megapixel inner selfie camera can manage. That inner camera is fine for video calls, but if you care about quality, you'll stick with the rear system. And finally, a quick note on transparency. The Pixel 10 Pro Fold is the first foldable from Google to implement what they call C2PA content credentials into every photo. This means that any AI edits you make or magic eraser changes leave a visible metadata trail, so it's clear what's been modified. So overall, the Pixel 10 Pro Fold has a capable camera setup that benefits massively from Google's software processing, but hardware-wise, it doesn't quite live up to the Pro branding. And yeah, that's a bit disappointing. Though if you've bought one, I'm sure you can wipe away those tears with some of that spare cash you've got lying around. Let's talk software, and this has classically been a very strong point for Pixel phones. This phone ships with Android 16 and Google's new Material Expressive design language. I daily drove the regular Pixel 10 for about a month before this phone, and I came away very impressed. The whole UI feels alive, colorful, smooth, and clean without the clutter or ads you see on some Android skins. It's very much that pure Google Android experience. Material Expressive is also more customizable. Quick settings can be rearranged more flexibly, typography across the OS has been emphasized, and live wallpaper effects now add little animations that react to your usage. It's small stuff, but it really makes this phone feel dynamic. On the foldable, the software really matters. The transitions between open and closed states are handled very smoothly, and even in those in-between cases, like propping it up at 90 degrees to watch YouTube, apps actually know what to do and adjust properly. The YouTube player shrinks into the top half of the display with controls down below. It feels really intentional rather than just hacked together. Multitasking is also solid, though it's not quite one tap easy yet. You can run 2 or 3 apps side by side, resize the windows, drag and drop between them. It's powerful once you get it set up, but it still takes a few steps to snap everything into place. And of course, the big story here is Google promising 7 years of OS and Pixel drop updates. That puts this foldable on par with Apple's iPhones for long-term support, and it's a huge deal when you consider most foldables from Samsung or Oppo historically fell off the update wagon much faster. So if you're spending $2+ grand on a foldable, at least you know it'll still be relevant years down the line. One of the new AI features you'll see pop up is Magic Queue. This is pretty cool in theory. It's meant to proactively suggest actions like pulling details from Gmail or Calendar to auto-draft a reply, or for example, pulling flight details from an app during a phone call. Honestly, I haven't found any use case where this feature works, so it still definitely feels like a work in progress, but it shows where Google wants these phones to go. So where does that leave us? The Pixel 10 Pro Fold is a pretty refined device. It's more powerful, brighter, and has a larger battery than last year's Fold. It even costs the same despite having double the base storage. But let's be real, at 2,699 Australian dollars, it's still an expensive phone, and it's a very niche product. If you see yourself making use of that large inner screen and all of that multitasking goodness available, then by all means. But if you just want the best Pixel experience, the regular Pixel 10 Pro or Pro XL slab phones will get you there. With a better camera system that actually befits the Pro name for far less money. But if you're one of those people that genuinely loves the idea of a foldable, a phone that doubles as a mini tablet, then the Pixel 10 Pro Fold is one of the most polished foldables you can actually buy here in the West. The software is lovely, the new gearless hinge feels durable and satisfying, and you get that dual device versatility. The wider context though, is that Chinese brands like Huawei and Oppo are running circles around Google and Samsung when it comes to foldable hardware, making devices that are thinner, lighter, and genuinely pushing innovation. This Pixel Fold, by comparison, feels like Google is playing it safe. So the Pixel 10 Pro Fold is good. It's very good in places, but it isn't groundbreaking. And maybe in 2025, that's the biggest story. But of course, I want to hear about what you think. Let me know in the comments below. Are you a fan of the Pixel 10 Pro Fold or foldables in general? What other foldables should we feature on the channel? Let me know down below. And of course, hit that subscribe button because we've got plenty more saucy tech reviews coming. Ciao for now.